Well, thank you for joining today's breakout session. And just to make sure that we are all in the right place, we are talking about making every dollar count, optimizing ad performance without increasing your budget. Given the current economic climate, this is more important than ever. But before we dive in, let's start with some introductions. I'm Robin Paris, and I'm a senior manager here at Amazon Ads. I lead our global SMB marketing team, and our mission is to help accelerate the growth for small and medium businesses like yourself in the Amazon store. But I am most excited to introduce you to our wonderful panelists today. First, Alicia Wallace. Alicia is the CEO and co-founder of Kazi Goods. Kazi Goods is on a mission to help local communities in sub-Saharan Africa drive long-term economic growth. Thanks for being here, Alicia. Can you tell us a little about yourself and Kazi Goods?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Robin. Kazi actually started from a college trip. I went on a volunteer trip to Sierra Leone, and the energy that I experienced there was undeniable, as well as the need. And I came back to the US on a mission to connect rural women with empowering, life-changing income by connecting them to customers and markets here in the US.
That's amazing. I love those personal stories and that connection. We also have Destiny with us here today. Destiny is the CEO and co-founder of Better Media. And Better Media is an Amazon partner that is revolutionizing retail advertising, helping businesses better understand their growth opportunities. Destiny, can you tell us about yourself and Better Media's mission?
Yeah, of course. So similar to Alicia, I also started senior in college. When I got handed my first Amazon advertising account, fast forward 7 years, I haven't found anything better to do with my time because still doing a lot of Amazon advertising, a lot of content and education, but now I get to lead an incredible team with Better Media.
It's amazing. I love it. We are so lucky to have you both here with us. We have a lot to get to this afternoon, and really the 4 key topics that we're going to be covering is first, we'll talk about the economic climate, how these macro environmental factors are impacting businesses and consequently advertising. Second, we'll talk about what metrics, tools, and educational resources that you have at your disposal to help you measure the success for your business. Third, we'll discuss how do you strike that balance between short and long-term growth. And lastly, we'll hear from Alicia and Destiny about their perspectives on the best advertising strategies for success. I'm hoping that by the time we end together today, whether you are joining us in the room or online, that you will walk away with some truly valuable information on how to optimize and deliver ad strategies, and not just for the current climate, but for your long-term success. Before we dive in, don't forget that you can submit questions for the session via the QR code on the screen. I will give you all a moment to take out your phones through the app. We would love for you to submit those questions. Obviously, don't be shy.
Go easy on us, is what you meant.
Go easy. Yeah, for sure. But yes, please submit those questions. All right. Alicia, what about the Amazon store made you feel like it would be a good fit for your business and your products?
We have traditionally been a brick and mortar retailer, and that was where we were finding most of our success until recently when we started to see a change in the marketplace in home decor. We were looking to drive growth and kind of evaluating all of our options. And as a mom who's shopping on Amazon frequently, I could not deny the opportunity to get my products in front of customers and make it more convenient for them to get them to their doorsteps.
Absolutely, and I can completely relate. I'm sure many of you, the packages that show up on my doorstep bring me lots of joy. Destiny, what do you believe are the main factors that sellers should consider when thinking to use Amazon as part of their sales and distribution strategy?
Yeah, of course. So as mentioned, it's incredibly easy as a customer to spend a lot of money on Amazon. And I think that translates into how easy it is to sell. And twofold, Amazon makes it really easy for brands to get up and running and to really control what they're doing on the platform. But it's also really easy to get granular and to achieve any of the objectives we're going to talk about today, whether it's driving new customer acquisition or just trying to be profitable. Amazon gives you an avenue for any of those.
Absolutely. And I'm always interested to know how do you approach advertising, before using Amazon ads? And so starting with you again, Alicia, I would love to hear, how did you do this with Kazi Goods?
So for us, being a traditional brick and mortar retailer, we were selling to physical retail stores. So we were going to trade shows, we were doing emails, those types of things. But as we started to evaluate entering e-commerce and online, we were really looking to social ads. How do we play into that? And with recent changes with iOS, it was actually more complicated and more challenging to really figure out the target audience in a general e-commerce setting, and we landed on Amazon for that reason.
Absolutely. I think the traditional things that you once do may not work as you continue to move forward. And I love hearing the different perspectives and how we think about this. So shifting a bit, we've mentioned, and I think in other sessions I've heard today too, a lot about the impact of the current economic climate. And looking at some of these environmental factors that are impacting businesses today, it's clear that a lot has changed in recent years. And according to a 2022 Higher Impact study, 77% of consumers are increasingly reevaluating their needs to shop more effectively. And I think that we can interpret more effectively to mean customers are becoming increasingly price sensitive to their reduced purchasing power. And I know it's not just impacting customers. The cost of goods has increased and having a direct impact on brands. Alicia, from your perspective, how have these macro environmental factors, impacted businesses over the last few years?
So for us, it's not even just changing our ad strategy as times have changed, but we actually had to go back and look at our product strategy. We had to say, what is it that we're selling and what is the macro environment? What are people doing? What do they want? We have been positioning ourselves as a home decor and wall decor retailer, making beautiful handcrafted products for the wall. And we found that people were, in the last couple of years, wanting to be out of their homes. We were all stuck at home during COVID, right? We decorated, we did that. And now we're ready to be traveling, we're ready to be around tables and have conversation with the loved ones that we had missed. And so we actually went back to the drawing boards and created a different product line. And we looked at the price sensitivity that people are facing today, and we said, we've made really high-end, really beautiful, really high-quality products, but how do we make something that's an everyday value, that's going to meet the needs of the customer and have a lot more functionality than things that we've developed in the past? And that has played true to now both our product strategy and where we are and what we've launched, but also our ad strategy and how that's changed today.
Absolutely. And for all of you, tomorrow, if you go down to the pavilion, we will actually be handing out some coasters from Kazi Goods. So for sure, check it out. They are absolutely beautiful. As you think about your advertising strategy, you mentioned shifting out of kind of the home decor category. How did you have to adjust then your advertising strategy to complement that?
Many of the same things applied, right? It's this test and learn theory of like, okay, do we have the right product? Launching, seeing Vine reviews, going back and adapting both the product listings, but we also had to make a lot of assumptions around what are the types of keywords here that we can afford and what are people targeting. And where we were not able to win on generic keywords like home decor, that was not successful for us. Generic keywords like placemats or boho placemats had really high searches, and we were actually profitable when we're targeting those keywords. And so those have been some different new theories that we've had to test and learn from.
That's great. And as we think about these broader economic climate shifts that we have mentioned, I would imagine, right, this also impacts the metrics and how you measure the success of your overall campaign strategy. Now I know there are numerous resources at your disposal when it comes to tracking and analyzing Amazon ads campaigns. Destiny, as an advertising expert, you've helped numerous Amazon sellers optimize their campaign strategy. In today's environment, what metrics do you recommend that clients should focus on when evaluating their success?
Well, as we discussed, things change really quick, whether it's your brand switching category focus or whether it's the economic changes. The same thing should also be reflected within your Amazon advertising. And in my opinion, that's the beautiful thing about Amazon advertising is the way we set up our campaigns allow us to really achieve that flexibility. So if you're only focused on profitability, then ACoS, ROAS, and bid management are really going to come into play. If you're focused on something like share of shelf or category growth, that's where you're really going to need to use a tool like brand metrics, insights, and planning to dive into your category metrics and look into conversion rate and tacos. How is your advertising compared to your organic sales growth? And all of these can be set up within Ad Console to reflect the current area of your business, but also you can adjust those metrics really quickly. It shouldn't be a set target for the year and then you walk away. If set up appropriately, you can be really reactive to the current environment, and I think that's a really beautiful thing about Amazon.
Absolutely. And I think what you mentioned as far as just the, depending on what your goals are, right? The metrics are absolutely going to be different. So, I mean, Alicia, obviously you have the tools within Amazon to use, but are there any third-party tools that you leverage to help drive improved performance?
Yeah, our team mainly uses Perpetua. That's used for market and competitor research and performance tracking. We're also using Helium 10 and Restock Pro for inventory management.
I think that's something to consider as well too. Is there are obviously internal tools, but a lot of things that you can use to really understand kind of the full impact of what you're doing. So shifting gears. We often see through voice of the customer feedback that there's a bias to focus on that short-term sales, conversion when it comes to, driving your strategy. And research indicates that about customer behavior, that 60% of customers now research products online before making a purchase. And 77% of Amazon customers said they prefer to wait for a product to go on sale rather than pay full price. And 67% of customers are willing to pay more for authentic brands, products, and services. So considering these, consumer behavior trends I'm seeing, I'm curious, from your perspective, how do you strike that balance between the short-term and long-term growth?
That's an interesting question, Robin, and it's very difficult in these settings. When being a small business, obviously cash flow and profitability are key, right? We want to have long-term, we want a long road ahead of us. And so for us, it really comes down to looking at how we're doing a full funnel approach. We have not just been successful looking at the bottom of the funnel and just focusing on conversion as much as I want to, right? As a business owner, I want to make sure that I can see that conversion actually get to cart. But what my team has had to show me and teach me is by taking a full funnel approach, bringing new customers into brand that didn't know us before, it's proven that they actually care, that they want to know and hear from us. And it actually changed our strategy and that we're bringing them into brand for certain either targeted keywords or certain targeted segments, but then we're actually seeing that they're buying more complementary products, telling other people about it and returning, which is increasing tacos, which you talked about, which for us is one of our goals right now, is increasing that organic growth. So it's a delicate balance, and getting that outside input has been really vital for me to understand, like, what is that short-term profitability focus, but also how do we build the brand of long-term customers who now know and love Causey and want to return when we don't have off-brand recognition.
Absolutely, and it's not just a one or the other, to your point, right? You really have to think about both. Destiny, as you advise clients in this area too, what is some advice that you offer?
Well, for one, there's definitely not a one-size-fits-all solution. So if you take away anything from this, you can set up your Amazon advertising strategy to really reflect your current climate and what you need as a brand. So some of the small things that I think are important to call out is the customer journey is not linear. When you're running a sponsored product ad, you're waiting for a customer to type in a search, right? You're just capturing the demand that Amazon's driven. But when you're starting to look at a sponsored brand ad or a sponsored display ad or DSP, you're actually starting to create a little bit of your own demand. So it's really important to consider these when that path to purchase is not linear, right? If you're looking at your placemats and you're sitting around the dinner table and everyone's talking about how much they love Causey, They're then going to go look at the Amazon store. And they're going to see the brand and the video ad and maybe go to your brand store as well. And that's really going to tell a good story. So something that we keep in mind is, again, setting up our campaigns in a segmented fashion that allows us to achieve all of these goals. But that mindset shift between short-term strategy and sponsored products being at the bottom of the funnel versus some of these other ad types, which are really creating demand for your brand, which is a competitive advantage, is really important as we start getting into some of these specific strategies.
Absolutely, and I think it's not linear, and I think both of these approaches and showcasing what makes your offering unique, right? What sets you apart from your peers. It's not only going to help in the short term, but truly will lead to that long-term sustainable growth. Alicia, going back to you, how do you determine kind of that appropriate allocation between the short-term, immediate sales focus versus that long-term growth in the Amazon store?
It still comes down to that balance, right? So we're still constantly balancing it. But for us, it's moving much more quickly these days, right? Where things are tighter and we are finding ourselves in a leaner position. So we are looking at things and turning them off much faster than we did before. We're giving them a little bit more time or looking at seasonality or things, but now we're going back to it daily and we're saying, what's not working and how do we turn it off today and funnel our resources back into what is working so that we are using our dollars and our ad spend wisely and really looking at pushing sales velocity behind the products and the campaigns that are working and bringing in more sales velocity behind those that are, and testing still as frequently as we were before, but maybe in smaller ways or slower than what we had wanted to, just continuing to keep that pace.
Absolutely, and I think that it's not a set it and forget it type strategy. From a partner perspective, obviously budget is a huge, I'm sure topic that comes up. So when your customers are facing these challenges, what's your advice?
Well, I think the overarching theme here is that you can get really granular with your strategy setup and you can make adjustments quickly, right? So when you set up your campaigns appropriately, you can move your budget really quickly based on what's performing well at that given time or what aligns most with your overall brand needs. Something as simple as a sponsored brand ad at the top of the page, right? You're able to advertise multiple products or drive to your store page for the price of one click. So that's something that we're going to consider when we're leaning out on a budget. Maybe we're in decor category where we have a lot of style variations, aesthetic variations, and we need to make that dollar last a little bit longer. We're going to look at some of those creative ad types. Maybe we're going to dive into sponsored display remarketing, so that way we make sure we're having multiple touch points with our customer to really drive that conversion home. So that way that first sponsored product ad can now be followed up with a sponsored display ad and really make sure those sales are coming through. I think the other beautiful thing is as we look at other ad types like streaming TV or sponsor brands vertical video, some of those ad types that are a little bit exciting but maybe seem out of reach for brands, you can run them within Ad Console with no minimums. And that's really fantastic because you can test and learn quickly with a lot less risk than maybe something that can be a little bit more competitive off platform.
Yeah, and I like what you say, test and learn, right? I mean, both it's not a set it and forget it, but also, test small. Don't be afraid to try new things. And I think, the ability to craft that effective advertising strategy is absolutely crucial, right? It can very well mean the difference in terms of weathering the current economic climate and positioning your business for that long-term growth. Alicia, as you think about Causey Goods, what factors go into crafting an ad strategy that's going to make every dollar count?
We've touched on some today, and that's sizing up the economic climate, making sure that your product and the market and the timing fit. Along with that, we've loved launching on Vine reviews, getting reviews in early, and actually looking at our full product offering and saying from the ads that we're doing to the product listings themselves to our brand stores, everything aligning the packaging that they're going to receive to make sure that when we are bringing new customers in, when we are paying for those ads, that they're actually going to count and that customers are going to be happy with what they're receiving and not go back and return them, that they're going to keep them and tell somebody else about it, which is going to drive that organic growth.
Absolutely, and that voice of the customer, to your point, is immensely important. Destiny, as you've been advising clients for about 7 years or so now, what is the advice that you offer them when they're looking to drive business in the Amazon store, but really almost take it to the next level?
Yeah. I think some of the important things that we've covered today are the current economic climate, right? Customers need a little bit more convincing before they make that final purchase. And one of the things that Kazi's done incredibly well is they have a story that resonates with people. But how do you tell that story in a digital landscape? How do you really stand out on the page within the search results? Historically, it was being top of search with a sponsored product ad, which is still incredibly strong. But now we have an opportunity to tell that brand story through the same ad types. That's just keyword targeting and product targeting. So adding a custom image to the sponsored brand ad, running a sponsored brand's video at the top of search, playing around with lifestyle images with sponsored display. They're all incredibly small things, but if you think about it from the customer experience, if you pull out your iPhone right now, or Android, I don't know, and type in any of your search terms on Amazon, put yourselves in the shoes of the customer and go through that experience. That headline search ad at the top of the page is incredibly, incredibly prominent. It stands out. And then as you scroll through, you're gonna see that video ad. Those ad types really hit home why a brand stands out on the page. And as we know through insights like AMC, we can see that all of the ad types do work together incredibly well. And you can have that proven to justify some of the investments in these ad types that maybe aren't as close to home for us because we've been selling for so long.
And I like your point of going through what the customer experience is going to be. I mean, obviously, it's very important to us internally, within Amazon, but I think for any brand, right, how important that is to see what customers see. What is the experience and how do you enhance it and how do you make it better? And really, what I love about both of the examples that you shared is it's a diversified approach. There's not a playbook. It's not a one size, fits all. When we look at our own internal data, we see that brands who have launched a sponsored brands campaign after already using sponsored products and a brand store saw a 21% increase in attributed sales, a 13% increase in ad clicks, and a 12% increase in ROAS 8 weeks after launching. And although this data is compelling, when you're facing those tighter budgets, this may feel out of reach. So Destiny, I'm sure this is something you hear from your clients all the time. What do you tell them?
Well, for one, don't get overwhelmed with sponsored brand ads. I think all of the different opportunities within a sponsored brand ad can become really overwhelming when it's as simple as just setting it up. At the end of the day, it's just keyword targeting and or product targeting, and that's the beautiful thing. But when it comes to a lean budget, you have to consider that image is going to increase your click-through rate and your conversion rate and your ROAS, which is already an efficiency play. And then you layer in the fact that you're able to advertise multiple products for the same price of one click. So a sponsored product ad is one product, one click. That's how PPC works. With sponsored brand ads, you can throw in other ASINs, which increases your average order value and also drives a lot more brand exposure. So all of those small details within sponsored brands can really drive a lot of efficiency. Not to mention you can add copy as well. So when you take that same granular approach of here's a specific keyword, I'm aligning a perfect lifestyle image, I'm customizing my copy to align with that keyword, you can really easily hit some of these ROAS metrics that we're seeing with sponsored brand ads.
Absolutely. Alicia, from Kazi Goods, how have you approached this?
For us, we have tested and learned what works well. We're using the tools, we're looking at our reviews, but we're also creating that original content and looking at complementary products. So how are we using those different ad opportunities, but then once we're hooking a customer, how can they come and actually purchase something else from us? How is that ad showing that one product that maybe they're looking for, but then we're setting the table and we're showing them it's not just a placemat, but these are coasters, this is a table runner, these are napkin rings, here is the whole setting that we can sell to you, and so that it's more holistic than just a single product and a single purchase.
Absolutely, and I think those complementary products that you mentioned and how do you keep customers coming back and building that loyalty. So building on this, I'm curious, What do you think is the most kind of either, overlooked or underappreciated strategy when it comes to driving an effective Amazon ad strategy?
So for us, we are looking at the whole customer experience. We're thinking about what is the customer doing with it and what do they want, right? But at the same time, we know that our brand story matters and that people love reading about the artisans and the materials that it comes from. And so by really telling that story, we kind of see it as a 30 split, 30% functionality. The customer wants to know, what are they going to do with it? How's it going to make their life better? But then what is it made from? How is it making a better planet? And who's it made by? And being our authentic self and really telling that story quickly and in a really concise way and consistently throughout all of our ad assets and our product listings, that has been the most successful for us.
I love that. And as I was learning about Causey Goods and meeting Alicia and just going into the mission of Causey Goods, but going into their brand store, I was like, their products are absolutely beautiful. So I love the story for sure that you're telling and the authenticity of your brand. So we're getting close to wrapping our discussion today before we're going to get into the Q&A. And I have one final question for both of you. What is the single most impactful piece of advice that you can share with our audience today when it comes to driving higher returns from your ad strategy and making every dollar count? Destiny, let's start with you.
I would say just continuously test. Not only are things changing quickly as a brand, but within your category. And not only within your category, but also within Amazon Advertising Console. It makes things complex, of course, but it can also be a major competitive advantage for you as a brand. A lot of these new rollouts, if you jump on them quickly, that can be a major opportunity. And they're always reiterating strategies. So even things that were launched, 4 to 5 years ago are constantly evolving. So this can be a really big advantage for brands who jump on them. And I think also, again, the no minimums and the granularity that Amazon advertising allows can be a huge advantage.
I love that advice. Alicia, your thoughts?
Yeah, that was great, Destiny. I think for us, as a brand owner, I just keep thinking about telling your story, diving into what's uniquely you, and really understanding why customers are coming to you and loving your product, and making sure that your assumptions are valid in that. When we launch products, we test them on Vine, like I mentioned, but we go in and read those reviews, and we see that people love reading the artisan tag. They love the natural fibers and how they smell in their home. And so we're going back into those product listings and really beefing them up and making sure that on the front end, people know what they're going to get, what the packaging's like, what that whole experience is. And we don't want things that are all just like manufactured in the same, and the product listings and image assets that look the same just at a cheaper price. As customers of Amazon ourselves, we want something unique, a good conversation-worthy table placemat that's not manufactured in a traditional setting, where we get to have a conversation around the table and tell that story is valuable as a customer as well. So lean into your brand, lean into what's uniquely you, and tell that wherever possible.
Absolutely, and I think for any of you who attended the keynote this morning, I think that was one advice also that Martha Stewart, mentioned as far as that passion for your brand, and it will come through.
Yep.
And customers will absolutely connect with that. So I think that sounds like very, holds true for Causey Goods as well. Well, that brings us to the end of our panel discussion today, and I want to thank, both of you for sharing your real-world experience with us. Now, as we get into kind of the Q&A, I want to make sure that we leave you with kind of the key takeaways from the session. First, don't feel like you immediately need to pull back on your ad strategy. In these times of economic challenges, use this as an opportunity to reevaluate, leverage the metrics and tools and resources that you have at your disposal. And second, craft an ad strategy that is going to lend to the short-term and long-term growth, right? This will ultimately lead to those sustainable results. And third, don't be afraid to be bold and authentic. Differentiating your products, your services will help you stand out from your peers. And in these times of these tighter budgets, economical uncertainty, that truly is the name of the game. And while this might sound like a tall order, I truly believe that if you apply some of these principles that we've talked about and take the advice, both from Alicia and Destiny and what they have shared, that there's really no challenge that you will not be able to overcome.